The locomotive hissed like a snake shedding its skin, spilling a cloud of steam and black soot onto the dry, packed earth of the Arizona Territory. When Clara Howell stepped down from the carriage, her hand on the hot iron railing trembled, just a little. She felt the heat press against her face right away. It was a solid, heavy thing, a physical weight, nothing like the damp, forgiving summers she had known back in Missouri. She pulled the brim of her bonnet down, trying to shield her pale skin that had not seen real, honest work sun in years. She was fragile. You could see that. Her bones were fine, like a bird's, and her gray dress, though made of good linen, was creased from the long journey. It spoke of better days, of a life that had money in it, even if that money was gone now. But beneath the fragility, her chin was set. She held a pride that had not been broken yet, only badly bent. She had come west for the same reason so many others did, to erase the past and build a future. She had answered an advertisement in the Matrimonial Times. A widower rancher, Mr. Gideon Cole, sought a wife, a partner. He had a modest ranch. He wrote, and 2 young sons who needed a mother's hand. His letters were brief, practical, and signed with a strong, plain script. Clara had written back, her own letters careful, omitting the one thing that mattered. She clutched her small valise in one hand, with the other. She pressed against her lower abdomen, a nervous habit she could not break. It was a secret gesture, a constant, cold reminder. The doctor's words, spoken in a quiet room 3 years back, when she was 17 and sweating out the fever that had nearly claimed her life. The sickness burned through you, Miss Howell, the old doctor had said, polishing his spectacles. It is a miracle you survived, but the internal inflammation, it was severe. The chance of fruitfulness, it is gone. Gone. Shame, that was the word for it. It felt like a heavy, indigestible stone she had been forced to swallow. In her world, a woman's worth was measured in her ability to produce sons, to fill a home, to continue a line. She had survived the fever, but the doctor's verdict had felt like a different kind of death. Her family, their wealth lost after the war, saw her as just one more mouth, and a useless one at that. So she had answered the ad. She would be a good wife. She would cook. She would clean. She would sew. She would raise Mr. Cole's 2 sons as if they were her very own. Surely that would be enough. Surely he would see her worth beyond what her body could not do. She would tell him. Of course, she would tell him once she was here, once he could see her willingness to work. He was there, waiting on the platform. Gideon Cole. He was a big man, just as she had pictured. His shoulders were thick, his beard was bleached and tangled from the sun, and his eyes were a pale, piercing blue. He looked her over as she approached, and her heart sank. He did not look at her like a man greeting his intended bride. He looked at her like a man checking a horse's teeth before a purchase. "Miss Howell," he grunted. It was not a question. "Mr. Cole, it is a pleasure to finally meet you." Her voice was thin, stolen by the dry air. "You're smaller than I figured," he said. He did not offer to take her bag. He gestured to the station master, a flustered, sweating man named Davies, who also ran the nearby trading post. "Davies, see to her trunk." "Right away, Gideon." "Mr. Cole turned back to Clara. "The ride to my spread is long. We'll stop at the post for supplies. Then we're gone. My boys are waiting." Clara's stomach twisted. Now. It had to be now. Before her trunk was loaded. Before she was taken one step further under false pretenses. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "Before we load my trunk, before we go anywhere, there is a matter of honesty I must address." Gideon Cole's eyes narrowed. The friendly welcome she had prayed for was nowhere in his face. "A matter?" "Yes, sir, in my letters, I told you I am strong. I can work as hard as any woman. I can cook, and I can mend, and I will be a devoted mother to your sons." "Get to it, Miss Howell." She took a breath, the hot air scorching her lungs. "What I did not say, sir, is that I cannot add to your family. I had a sickness some years ago. I am barren. Sir, I cannot bear children." She said the word barren. It hung in the air between them, ugly and final. The station platform, which had been buzzing with the noise of arrival, went quiet. The baggage handler stopped. Mr. Davies, halfway to her trunk, froze. Gideon Cole's face, already weathered and brown, turned a dark, mottled red. He did not lower his voice. He did not take her aside. He exploded. "Baron?" His voice cracked across the platform like a whip. "You came all this way? You let me pay your passage? You wasted my time? And you're barren?" Clara flinched, stepping back. "I can work, sir. I can care for your boys. I promise. I will." "I got boys," he roared, jabbing a thick finger at her. "I need more sons. I need a wife, not a hired girl. What good are you to me?" He turned on the station master. "Davies, you run the post. You handled the letters between us. Did you know of this? Is this some kind of swindle?" "Gideon, for heaven's sake, how would I know?" Davies said, wringing his hands. "This is private woman's business." "It's my business now." Cole kicked at the dirt, a cloud of dust rising to settle on Clara's dress. He pointed right at her, his face contorted with a rage that was born of pure, practical disappointment. The few people on the platform, a couple of miners caked in grime, a preacher in a dusty black coat, the telegraph operator, they all turned to stare. "She's damaged goods. Davies, damaged goods. I paid passage. I paid for a wife, a woman to raise a family on my land. What use is this pale, empty thing?" Clara stood frozen. The shame she had carried as a stone inside her was now outside, painted on her for everyone in this strange, cruel new world to see. She felt the blood drain from her face, but she would not cry. She would not give him the satisfaction. She just stood there, straight-backed, while her world fell to pieces. "Well, she's your problem now. Davies," Cole spat. "I'm not paying the balance, and I'm not taking her. You can send her back to Missouri on your own coin." He stomped away, his boots heavy on the wooden planks. He untied his horse, mounted it in one angry motion, and rode out of the settlement, never once looking back. He left a thick, vibrating silence in his wake. Clara was stranded. Her trunk, her one connection to her old life, sat on the dirt. She had no money. She had no return fare. She had nowhere to go. "Mr. Davies looked at her, his face a mix of pity and panic. He was a merchant, not a charity. He now had a woman on his hands that nobody wanted. "Miss Howell," he started, wiping his brow with a greasy kerchief. "Lord Almighty, I don't know what to tell you. You have no funds at all." She shook her head, numb. The miners who had been watching started to snicker. "Tough luck, Gideon," one called out to the empty air. "Looks like you got a faulty product." "Maybe we can find a use for her, eh?" the others said, laughing. Clara shrank. This was it. This was the end of the line. And then a shadow moved. He had been there the whole time, leaning against the far wall of the station, under the overhang, away from the sun. She had noticed him when she first arrived, only because he was so different. He was tall, taller than Gideon Cole, but lean. He was an Apache man. He was not in tribal paint or buckskins. The outline said plain clothes, and that's what they were. Worn denim trousers, a faded linen shirt, and moccasins that made no sound. His black hair was long, tied back at the nape of his neck with a simple leather thong. His face was still, like it was carved from the Red Canyon rock itself. He had watched the entire scene. He had watched Gideon Cole roar, and he had watched Clara break. He had not moved. He had not spoken. He had just observed. His name was Taza. The townsfolk knew him. He traded sometimes, but mostly he kept to himself. He was a ghost from a past they were trying to burk. He pushed himself off the wall. He walked slowly, his movements fluid and quiet. The miners stopped laughing. The preacher stiffened. Taza did not look at them. He did not look at Clara. He stopped in front of the flustered station master, Mr. Davies. Taza reached into the pocket of his trousers. He pulled out a single, heavy coin, a silver dollar. It caught the cruel afternoon light and flashed. He held it out to Davies. Davies blinked, confused.
What? What is this, Taza? This ain't your business. Go on, now.
Taza did not move. He just held the dollar, steady as a rock, between his thumb and forefinger. His gaze was fixed on Davies. The silence stretched. It was the head miner who broke it, his voice full of disbelief and cruel humor.
Well, I'll be, the miner chuckled, spitting a stream of tobacco juice. What's he want, Davies? Is he buying the white woman?
The laughter that followed was sharp and ugly.
$1. That's what the Baron one is worth. $1 for Gideon's leavings.
Clara felt the sound like a physical blow. She wanted to faint. She wanted the ground to open up and swallow her. Davies looked at the dollar in the Apache's hand. He looked at Clara, standing there like a statue of shame. He saw a problem he did not want. Taza was offering a solution. $1 was $1, and it would get these worthless goods off his hands.
Now, Taza,
Davies said, his voice weak.
She ain't livestock. You can't just buy her.
Taza just waited. The dollar did not waver. He was not buying livestock. He was settling her debt. The debt of her passage. The debt of her existence. Davies looked at Clara.
Miss, this man, you?
Clara could not speak. With a heavy sigh, Davies made his choice. He was a trader. This was a trade. He snatched the silver dollar from Taza's hand and quickly pocketed it. She's free to go where she pleases, Davies declared to the air, washing his hands of the entire affair. If she pleases to go with you, Taza, that's her choice. It's no concern of mine. He turned and walked quickly into the trading post. Slamming the door behind him, the show was over. The miners shrugged, laughing, and wandered off toward the saloon. Clara was left alone on the platform with the silent Apache man. He did not grab her. He did not command her. He simply looked at her, just once. His dark eyes held no pity, but no cruelty either. They were just watchful. He turned his back on the town, on the station, on the laughter. He nodded his head, a single, simple gesture, toward the edge of the settlement where 2 horses, a steady-looking mare and a lean gelding, were tied. Then he started walking. Clara stood there. Her heart was hammering against her ribs so hard she thought it might break them. She had a choice. She could stay here, where she was damaged goods. Here, where she had no money, no roof, and where men like those miners would be waiting for dark. Or she could follow the silent man who had just paid $1 silver for her. She was numb. She was exhausted. The pride that had kept her spine straight was just an echo now. She looked down at her valise. She picked it up. She left the heavy trunk where it sat. It belonged to a different person, a different life. Her feet moved, one after the other, kicking up little puffs of dust. She walked past the station. She walked past the saloon. She followed the Apache man out of the settlement, the laughter of the town fading behind her. The shame, however, followed, burning on her back like the Arizona sun. She followed him into the desert. They traveled for hours. He put her on the mare. It was an older horse, but gentle, and it walked with a steady gait. He did not tie her hands. He did not put a rope on her. He just handed her the reins, got on his own horse, and started riding. The world was red and brown and brittle. The sun was a hammer, beating down on them. There was no softness anywhere. Giant cacti stood like grim, wounded sentinels, and the wind whispered through thorny brush. He did not speak, not one word. The only sounds were the clop, clop, clop of the hooves on the grit, the creak of old leather, and the ringing in Clara's ears. She thought she might die of thirst. Her throat was a tube of cracked clay. Her tongue felt thick in her mouth. Just as the sun began to tilt low, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple, he stopped. He dismounted in one fluid motion. He went to his saddlebag and pulled a metal canteen. He walked over to her horse. Clara flinched, pulling back, expecting— she did not know what she expected. A blow, a rough command. He just held out the canteen. She stared at it. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely reach for it. He waited. She fumbled, finally taking it. The metal was warm from the sun. She pulled the cork and lifted it to her lips. The water was hot, and it tasted of tin, but it was the most wonderful thing she had ever known. It was life. She drank until her Missouri manners told her it was rude to take so much. She lowered it, her throat aching, and tried to hand it back. He did not take it. He just looked at her and gestured with his chin toward the canteen. More. She drank again, this time deeply, desperately, letting the water run down her chin and stain the front of her dusty dress. Only when she was truly finished, when she sighed and lowered the canteen, did he take it from her. He wiped the mouth of it with his thumb. Not in disgust, she noted, but just as a habit. Then he lifted it and took one small, quick sip for himself. He corked the canteen, tied it back on his saddle, and got on his horse. They rode on. The simple act confused her more than the dollar. He had paid for her like she was a sack of flour, but he gave her water first. They rode until the purple shadows were long and swallowing the canyons. The air turned cool, then cold. Clara, in her thin linen, began to shiver. He stopped at a place that looked like a scar on the land. It was a small, broken-down cabin, barely more than a shed, probably built by some hopeful prospector who had long since given up. It was just 4 low adobe walls and a patchy roof made of brush, but it was shelter. He got down and motioned for her to do the same. Her legs were so stiff she nearly fell from the mare. He did not help her. He was already busy, unsaddling the horses and rubbing them down with dried grass. Clara stumbled inside. The single room smelled of dust, old ashes, and pack rats. Taza entered a moment later. He built a fire in the broken hearth with an efficiency that amazed her. No wasted motion. He struck a single match, and in moments, a small, clean fire was crackling, throwing blessed warmth into the tiny space. He pulled a strip of dried meat from his bag, jerky. He held it out to her. She took it. It was tough as shoe leather, smoky and salty, but it was food. She sat on the hard-packed dirt floor, as far from him as she could get, and chewed. She had been silent all day, numb, but as the fire warmed her skin, the numbness began to wear off, and the terror and confusion set in. The silence in the small cabin was huge. The firelight flickered on his face. It was a hard face. Yes, there were lines around his eyes and a deep scar along his jaw, but it was not a cruel face. It was just closed. Then she heard it, a high, yipping howl, far off, answered by another, closer. Coyotes. The sound pierced her numbness. It was the sound of the wilderness, of a place that would eat her alive. The question that had been sitting like a stone in her own gut all day finally burst out. Her voice was a dry croak. Why? He did not look at her. He was staring at the small fire, his hands resting on his knees. Why pay for me? She pressed, the shame rising again, needing to be spoken aloud. You heard him. You heard what Mr. Cole said. I am infertile. The word was poison on her tongue. I cannot have children. I am worthless. Why pay for me? He was silent for a long moment. He added a small, dry piece of mesquite to the fire. The sparks flew up into the dark chimney. Then he turned his head. He looked at her. His eyes were dark, so dark they seemed to swallow the firelight, and for the first time, she felt he was truly seeing her. Not the worthless goods, not the barren woman, not the pale thing, just her. He spoke. His voice was low and rough from disuse, as if he did not waste it on many words. "You're still alive?" The answer made no sense, and yet it made all the sense in the world. He was not answering her question about fertility. He was answering a question she had not even asked. He had not bought a womb. He had not bought a wife. He had what? He turned away from her then, satisfied. He rolled himself into a thin blanket on the far side of the small cabin, giving her the fire and all the space the room allowed. In minutes, his breathing was deep and even. Clara sat in the dark. The fire died down to glowing red embers. The coyotes howled again, much closer this time, a chorus of hungry ghosts. She finally broke. The tears she had refused to shed on the platform, the tears she had refused to give Gideon Cole, the tears she had swallowed in front of the laughing miners. They came now. They were not loud. She made no sound. They were just silent. Hot tears that spilled from her eyes and soaked the collar of her dusty, ruined Missouri dress. She wept for the children she would never hold. She wept for the family that had sold her off. She wept for the life she thought she was coming to, and the humiliation she had found instead. And she wept for the silver dollar. "You're still alive." She looked at the dark shape of the man sleeping across the dirt floor. He had paid the dollar. He had given her water. He had given her food and fire. She did not know if this man had saved her from the wolves, or if he had just claimed her for himself. She was alive, yes, but she was not sure, in this vast, dark, and howling desert, what that really meant. The sun found them at dawn, sharp and white, cutting into the small, dark cabin. Clara woke with a start, her neck stiff, the smell of cold ashes in her nose. For one disorienting second, she was in her bed in Missouri, the fever just breaking. Then she saw the dirt floor, the empty hearth, and the man, Taza, already outside, checking the horses. The night's weeping had left her feeling hollowed out, empty and lightheaded. She felt a sting of shame, wondering if he had heard her. He had not, or if he had, his face showed nothing. He just gestured for her to come, and they mounted. They rode for most of that day, moving deeper into a landscape that grew more alien and severe with every mile. The rolling hills of the high desert gave way to jagged rock formations, steep canyons, and a sky so big and blue it felt like a judgment. They followed a dry riverbed, the sand thick and hoof-deep, until it met a thin, sluggish trickle of water. They followed the water. It led them into a narrow canyon, the walls rising up on either side, a ribbon of green, willows and cottonwoods, clinging to the bank. It was cooler here, out of the direct sun. And then the canyon opened up into a small, sheltered valley, tucked against the red rock wall, almost invisible until you were upon it, was Taza's home. It was not a cabin. It was not a ranch. It was a simple, weathered adobe hut, 2 small rooms, a roof of packed earth and ocotillo branches, and a chimney made of stacked rock and mud. Nearby, a small, stubborn patch of corn fought against the dry soil, and a corral held no animals. It was the quietest place Clara had ever been. It was isolated, hidden, and a long, long way from any settler's land. This was it. This was where her dollar had brought her. He took the horses, and Clara was left to stand in front of the low doorway. She stepped inside. The main room was swept clean, a hearth, a rough-hewn table with 1 stool, and shelves carved right into the thick adobe walls. On them sat a few clay pots, a tin of coffee, a bag of cornmeal, and some dried herbs. In the second, smaller room, there was only a raised platform with a bedroll of furs and blankets. This was his life, and now it seemed it was hers. The first few days were a quiet kind of misery for Clara. She tried to help. She was determined not to be a burden, to prove that her dollar had purchased something of value. It was a failure. Back in Missouri, even with her family's money gone, she had been a lady. Her skills were in embroidery, in playing the pianoforte and arranging flowers. She had never cooked a meal over an open fire. She had never washed clothes in a river, beating them against a rock. She had never had to think about where food came in from, beyond a pantry. Here, her uselessness was a glaring, obvious fact. She tried to make corn cakes, the way she had seen their old cook do. She mixed the meal with river water and set it on a hot stone by the fire. She turned her back for 1 minute, and they burned to black, bitter pucks. Taza came in, smelled the smoke, looked at the blackened cakes, and said nothing. He simply took a handful of dry corn, ground it himself, and made a thin, gray mush that he ate without expression. Clara felt the heat in her face. Shame. Again. She tried to sweep the dirt floor. The wind, which never seemed to stop, blew a fine red dust back in through the open doorway as fast as she swept it out. She tried to mend one of her dresses, but her hands, soft and uncalloused, fumbled with the coarse thread. She had no cooking skills. She had no strength. And most of all, she had no children to offer, no future to build. She was just another mouth, a pale, weak, barren mouth he had to feed. The land itself seemed to want her gone. The wind was a constant, dry whisper that grated on her nerves and chapped her lips. The brush was all thorns, catching at her skirts, tearing the delicate linen. One morning, she went to the river for water and nearly stepped on a rattlesnake, coiled and buzzing, its dry rattle echoing the sound of the wind. She screamed and dropped the pot, scrambling back to the hut, her heart pounding. Taza heard her. He came out, holding the long knife he used for skinning. He saw her, pale and shaking, pointing toward the river. He went, and a few minutes later, he returned. He did not have the snake. He just looked at her, and she could not tell if it was concern or annoyance. "It is his home," he said, his first words to her in 2 days. "You watch. You listen." She felt like a child, a stupid, foolish child. She was a burden. He had saved her from Gideon Cole, only to be saddled with her. She began to stay inside the hut more, sitting on the stool, her hands clasped in her lap, feeling herself shrink. But Taza, he was not cruel. Gideon Cole had been cruel. Her father had been cruel. Taza was just silent, and his silence was filled with action. Her shoes, the only pair she owned besides her ruined traveling boots, were thin-soled, meant for Missouri drawing rooms. The rocks and thorns had cut them to ribbons. One morning, she woke up to find them gone from beside her bedroll. Her heart sank. Had he taken them? Was this his way of telling her she could not leave, or that she was not worth shoes? She spent the day in a panic. That evening, she found them by the door. He had taken them, and he had fixed them. He had cut a new, thick sole from a piece of rawhide and stitched it to the bottom of her shoe with strong, neat stitches, the holes punched with an awl. He had rubbed the leather uppers with some kind of grease, making them darker, but also softer and water-resistant. She slipped her foot in. It was a solid, strong repair, better than new. She looked at him, where he sat by the fire, sharpening his knife. "You fixed my shoes," he grunted, not looking up. A few days later, another quiet act. Her hair was a constant trial. The fine, pale strands were hopelessly tangled by the wind and the dry air. Her one tortoiseshell comb had broken on the journey. She had taken to just braiding it, yanking the knots out with her fingers, wincing at the pain. She saw him, in the evenings, carving a piece of pale, hard wood, greasewood, maybe. He worked slowly, the knife blade flashing. She thought he was making a tool or a trap part. Then, one morning, it was on her bedroll, a hairbrush. No, not a brush, a comb. It was thick and heavy in her hand. The teeth were carved one by one, sanded smooth, wide and strong. It was not pretty, it was not fine, but it was practical, and it was hers. She ran it through her hair. It pulled through the tangles, the smooth wood moving without catching. It was an incredible, intimate kindness. She held it in her hands, her back to him. She could not find the words to thank him. She was not even sure he wanted to be thanked. And then there was the tea. Every morning, he was up before the sun, out in the cool dark. When he came back, as the first light hit the canyon rim, he would build the fire and put a small, blackened pot on to boil. He would drop in a handful of dried, bitter-smelling herbs. The first time, he poured the dark liquid into a tin cup and set it on the table near her. She had sipped it, and it was terrible. It tasted like earth and bark. But it was warm, and it cut the morning chill. She drank it, and every morning after, there it was, a cup of bitter, warm tea, left for her. She was not a wife, she was not a partner. She was something he fixed shoes for, something he carved combs for, something he made tea for. It was confusing, and it made the shame of her uselessness feel even heavier. About 3 weeks after she arrived, the outside world found them. Clara was outside, trying to patch a tear in her dress, when she heard the horses and the laughter. It was not Taza. He was gone, checking his traps. 3 men on horseback rode into the small valley. They wore the grime of miners, their clothes stiff with sweat and dirt. They reined in when they saw her, their eyes wide with surprise, then sliding into a greasy, knowing familiarity. "Well, looky here, boys," said the leader, a big man with a red beard, meaner looking than Gideon Cole. "Looks like the rumors are true." "Damn me," another one whispered, taking off his hat and wiping his forehead. "It is a white woman." The leader's eyes raked over her, from her pale, tangled hair down to her patched dress. "Gideon Cole's leavin's, ain't ya? Heard he sent you packin'. Heard you was faulty." Clara stood up, her needle and thread clutched in her hand. Her heart was a cold knot. "And now you're shacking up with the Apache," the man sneered. "Traded a white man's ranch for a mud hut. How's that working out for you, missy?" "Bet he paid more'n $1 for that," the third man said, and they all laughed. "What's it like, honey?" the leader asked, leaning over his saddle horn. "Bedding down with a savage? Does he treat you right, or does he know what you're worth?" Clara could not move. She felt the same way she had on the platform, pinned, exposed. "You're a squaw wife now. Girl, that's what you are. The town's laughing about it. A pure white woman, gone to waste on a redskin."
"Leave me alone,"
Clara whispered, her voice shaking.
"Please, we ain't bothering you."
"Oh, you're bothering us. Sweet thing," the leader said, his voice dropping. "Just seeing you here, it's unnatural." He made a move, as if to dismount. And then Taza was there. He had come from the rocks, as silent as a shadow. He held 3 rabbits in one hand, his knife in the other. He did not run, he did not shout. He just appeared, standing between Clara and the riders. He did not look at Clara. He fixed his gaze on the leader. He said nothing. The air in the little valley changed. The laughter stopped. The miner's hand froze on his saddle horn. Taza just stood there, his stillness more potent than any threat. His dark eyes were flat, cold, and empty of fear. He just watched them. He just waited. The leader, the man with the red beard, was big, but Taza's silence was bigger. It was an ancient, patient thing. The miner licked his chapped lips. He looked at his friends, who were suddenly very interested in their horses' manes. The joke was over. "Just passing through. Apache," The leader grunted, pulling his horse's head around. "Just making our rounds. Keep your property to yourself." They rode out, much faster than they had ridden in, their backs stiff. Taza watched them until they were out of the canyon. He did not relax. He did not put his knife away. He just watched. Clara was trembling, her legs so weak she had to sit on the ground. He had protected her. He had stood for her. He turned, finally. He looked at her, sitting in the dirt. Then he looked at the dress in her lap. "Go inside," he said. "The sun is hot." He walked past her into the hut, dropped the rabbits, and went back out, walking up toward the canyon rim. He did not want her thanks. He did not want anything. He just went. Clara pulled her knees to her chest. Squaw wife. The word was ugly. A brand. The town was laughing. She had not escaped the shame. She had only traded it for a different kind. Taza stood on the high rim of the canyon, looking out over the vast, broken land that stretched to the horizon. The wind was strong up here, pulling at his long hair. He was not thinking about the miners. They were nothing. Flies. He was thinking of another time, the smell of smoke. Not from a campfire, but from a burning village, the sound of soldiers' bugles, the screams. He had been a young man, a fighter. He had a wife then, a son. He remembered his wife's face when the soldiers came, the terror in her eyes as she grabbed their boy. He had told them to run. He had stayed to fight. He fought. For 2 years, he fought. He had rage in him, a fire that burned as hot as the sun. He had joined with other warriors, striking back, a ghost in the mountains. But the soldiers kept coming, and one day, he returned to the hidden camp where he had left his family, and it was gone. Just ashes, and the silence of the dead. They had been rounded up, forced relocations. The white men called it a death march. He learned later that his wife and son had not even made it to the reservation. They had fallen on the trail, just left there, in the dust. The rage did not die. It just collapsed. It turned into a grief so heavy he could barely breathe. Fighting had not saved them. His rage had not protected them. It had only left him alone. So he had stopped. He had walked away. He left the fighting. He left the reservations. He left it all. He had come here, to this hidden place, to be with the rocks and the water. He wanted only peace. He wanted to be left alone, to let the silence heal what was left of him. He carried that grief, that great heavy stone, every day. Clara, she was another person the world had tried to break. He had seen it on the platform. He had seen it in her eyes. He had bought her for $1, not because he wanted a wife or a servant, but because he had recognized the look of someone who had lost everything, but was still, stubbornly, standing. He stayed on the rim until the sun was low. Then he went back down to the hut. That night, the silence in the small room was different. The incident with the miners had broken something. Clara was sitting by the fire, mending his shirt. Not her dress, his. The rawhide stitched shoes were on her feet. The carved comb was on the shelf. She spoke to the fire, her voice so low he almost did not hear it. "They sold me." He stopped. He had been cleaning one of his traps. "My parents," she said. Her hands were still, the needle held in the air. "Back in Missouri, our family had prestige, a big house, land. But my father made bad investments after the war. We were ruined. We were in debt." She paused, and he waited. He knew how to wait. "I was supposed to marry a rich man. That was my purpose, to save the family name. Then I got the fever." She looked up at him, her eyes clear and dry in the firelight. "When the doctor told them I was barren, it was like a final judgment. It was not just that I could not have children. It was that I had no value. I could not be married off to save them. I was just a debt, a failure." She looked back at the fire. "That advertisement from Mr. Cole, They saw it. My father gave me the train fare. He called it an opportunity, but we both knew what it was. He was erasing a debt. He was selling me off to a stranger to be rid of me. He said I had no value without children. She put the shirt down. She had been carrying this story just as he carried his. She turned to him. The firelight was on her pale, proud face. That night in the cabin, I asked you why you paid for me. You said I was still alive. That wasn't the real answer. Why did you do it? Why did you take me? Taza looked at her. He saw her. Not as a white woman, not as Gideon's reject, not as a barren thing. He saw her on the platform, surrounded by laughing, cruel men. He saw her spine, straight as a willow branch. He saw the life in her, buried deep under all that shame. He thought for a long time. He searched for the English words. He remembered her, standing in the hot sun, all alone. You looked, he said, his voice rough, like you wanted to live. He paused, then added, his voice even lower, I did too. Clara stared at him, and the space between them filled. It was not passion. It was not the heat of desire she had read about in forbidden books. It was something heavier, colder, and stronger. It was the quiet, unbreakable bond of shared sorrow. It was the understanding of two people who had been weighed, measured, and declared worthless by the world. It was survival. She picked up his shirt and pulled the thread through the cloth. He went back to his trap. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside the canyon. But inside the little hut, there was a new kind of silence. It was not empty, it was shared. That bond of shared sorrow, it's a strong foundation. It's stronger than quick passion, and it lasts longer. It's what got them through the next few weeks. As the desert summer finally broke, and the nights started to get a sharp, cold edge to them. Autumn in that high country was not a gentle thing. It was not a time of golden leaves and harvest plenty. It was a season of withdrawal. The sun grew weaker, the wind got a meaner bite, and the land, which had given so little, began to take even that back. Their small patch of corn, the one Taza had been tending by the river, was their hope for the winter. Clara had taken to watering it, weeding it, watching the green stalks grow with a kind of fierce, protective pride. It was the one thing she felt she could do. She woke one morning to a world that was silent. The wind had stopped. She pushed the blanket off and saw her own breath plume in the air of the small hut. Taza was already gone, his bedroll neat. Clara pulled her shawl tight and pushed open the heavy wooden door. The world was white. A hard frost had come down from the high peaks in the night, silent and killing. It coated every rock, every thorny branch, in a brittle, glittering lace. It was beautiful, in a terrible, deadly way. She ran to the cornfield, her patched shoes, the ones Taza had mended, crunched on the frozen mud. It was gone. The stalks were black, drooping, and dead. The small, hopeful ears of corn had frozen solid. The kernels turned to useless, starchy ice. She touched one of the blackened leaves. It crumbled in her hand like ash. All that work, all that hope, gone in one night. She stood there until the sun rose, its weak light offering no warmth, and she felt a despair colder than the frost. When Taza returned, he carried no game. He walked past her to the cornfield, looked at the ruin, and his face, already so still, seemed to become part of the rock behind him. He looked at the sky. Winter comes fast, he said. That was all. Food became the only thing, the center of every day. The small sack of flour Taza had bought in town was mostly gone. The coffee was gone. They were down to cornmeal, salt, and jerky. Taza began to hunt every day, from before sunup to after sundown. He would leave, silent, his rifle in hand, and return long after dark, walking with a heavy, bone-deep weariness. Sometimes he brought back a rabbit or a pair of quail. Once, a small deer, which felt like a miracle. That deer, they wasted nothing. Clara had to learn. She helped him skin it, her stomach rolling, her Missouri manners screaming. But she did it. They smoked the meat into jerky, boiled the bones for broth, and she even tried to tan the hide, scraping it with a sharp rock until her arms ached and her hands were raw. More often, he came back with nothing. The outline said he returned bloodied and silent, and that was the truth. He would return scratched and torn from pushing through thick, thorny brush. One night, he came back with a long, bleeding gash on his arm from a cornered bobcat that had gotten away. Clara, who had once flinched at the sight of a skinned rabbit, found herself washing the blood from his arm with a rag, her touch firm. He let her, hissing as the water hit the raw flesh, but he did not pull away. She had to learn. Her uselessness was a luxury they could no longer afford. She watched him. She saw how he moved, how he wasted nothing. No motion, no word, no scrap of food. She started gathering. He showed her, once, what roots to dig for. A small, bitter, potato-like thing. He showed her the piñon trees, and she spent days hunched over, gathering the tiny, precious nuts, her fingers sticky with resin. She learned to cook, not real cooking, survival cooking. She made a thin stew of jerky, bitter roots, and cornmeal. It tasted like mud and salt, but it was hot, and it filled their bellies. She sewed. Her delicate stitches were useless here. She learned his way, punching holes with a sharp awl, pulling sinew through. She patched his shirt. She patched her dress. She patched the patches. One morning, he did not take his rifle. He took a coil of thin wire from his bag and a knife. He walked out to a game trail, Clara following him. He did not tell her to come. He just did not tell her to go. He knelt by a rabbit run. He did not speak. He just did, his hands long and brown, moved with quiet, expert speed. He cut a branch, bent it, tied the wire into a simple, perfect loop, a snare. He placed it, brushed away their footprints, and stood. He looked at her. Then he handed her the coil of wire. It was a test or a lesson. She tried, her hands, rougher now but still clumsy, fumbled with the wire. She dropped it. The branch snapped. She felt the familiar, hot flush of shame. He waited. He did not help. He did not criticize. He just stood there, patient as the rock, until she finally, angrily, got it right. A clumsy, ugly loop, but it was a loop. He nodded. Once. They began to work as a pair. He would hunt the high country, and she would manage the snares, gather the roots, and keep the fire. The first time she checked her line of traps, they were all empty. The second day, one was sprung, the rabbit gone. The third day, she found one. A large jackrabbit, caught by the neck. It was dead. Its eyes were open, glassy. Clara, who had wept for a ruined cornfield, just looked at it. She felt a cold, hard knot of satisfaction. It was food. It was life. She reset the trap, her hands moving more surely now. She carried the rabbit back to the hut, the blood dripping on her skirt. She was no longer a lady from Missouri. She was not even sure what she was. But she was not hungry. The days grew shorter. The cold settled in. And then the first great winter storm hit. It did not come on slowly. It arrived with a scream. The wind came down from the mountains, a solid wall of noise and ice. It was not snow. Not at first, but a fine, hard sleet that hit the adobe hut like 1,000 tiny bullets. Taza was already inside. He had come in an hour earlier, his face grim, carrying a huge load of firewood. He had sensed it coming. He barred the door. The sound was terrifying. It was a physical thing, the wind trying to tear their little hut from the canyon wall. It moaned in the chimney. It rattled the door. It pushed through every tiny crack. They were trapped. For 3 days, the world was gone. There was no outside. There was only the small, dark room, the smell of wood smoke and dried herbs, and the constant, screaming wind. The proximity was absolute. They ate, they slept, they mended their gear, all within a few feet of each other. The hut was so small that they could not move without being aware of the other. On the second day, the silence, which had been their companion, began to feel heavy. The storm was too loud to ignore. Clara was mending Taza's shirt, the one he had worn when he fought the miners. It was ripped again. She sat on her bedroll, her back against the cold adobe wall, her fingers working the awl and sinew. Taza sat by the fire, carving. He was making a new handle for his knife. The firelight flickered, throwing shadows across his still face. Clara found herself speaking, just to fill the noise. "My mother," she said, her voice sounding strange and loud against the wind. "She had a rose garden back in Missouri. Before, it was the only thing my father let her have that was just hers." Taza's hand stilled on the wood. He did not look up, but he was listening. "She loved those roses, red and white. She talked to them. I used to think she was so foolish." Clara's hands stopped their work. "When the money was gone, the first thing he did was sell the land with the garden. To pay a debt, he had the men plow it under. She never came out of her room after that, not really." She looked down at the shirt in her lap. "I think I hated him for that, more than for selling me." She had never told anyone that. Taza looked at the fire. "My mother," he said, his voice low. "She taught me to find water. She would smell the air. She said the trees would talk to her." Clara looked up. He had never spoken of his family, only that he had lost them. She was a good woman. That was all, but it was more than he had ever said. Clara went back to her sewing. The wind howled, but inside, something had settled. The space between them felt warmer. Later that evening, the storm was at its peak. He was cleaning his rifle. Clara was adding a handful of roots to a pot of thin rabbit stew. She stumbled on the uneven floor. She put her hand out to catch herself, and she smiled. A real, actual smile. It felt rusty, like a hinge that had not been used. "Lord," she said, almost laughing, "I am as clumsy as a newborn calf. Back home, I could waltz for 3 hours and never miss a step." Taza looked up, and the corner of his mouth twitched. It was not a smile. Not really, but it was close. "Waltzing," he said, testing the word, "is not for this land." "No," she agreed, her own smile softening. "It is not." The storm raged. But inside the hut, for the first time, there was a fragile, flickering peace. She finished mending his shirt. It was a rough, strong patch, built to last. He had put his rifle aside and was just watching the fire. "Your shirt," she said, holding it out. He reached for it. As he took it, his hand brushed hers. It was not like the canteen, or the jerky, or the tools. This was just skin. His fingers were calloused and warm. Hers were chapped and cold. "It was an accident, a spark." They both froze. They were looking at their hands. His dark, hers pale, just barely touching. A tenderness passed between them. It was as real as the heat from the fire. It was not passion. It was recognition. A quiet, sudden, and complete awareness of the other person. He did not pull his hand away. She did not pull hers. Then, very slowly, he closed his hand over hers. Just for a second. A silent thank you. For the shirt, for the story, for still being there. Then he took the shirt, and the moment was over. But it had happened. The storm broke on the 4th morning. The world was scoured clean, buried in white. They were almost out of food. They were completely out of salt. "We have to go to town," Clara said. Taza just nodded. It was a risk, but it was necessary. They dug their way out of the hut, saddled the horses, and rode out. The ride was slow, the snow deep. When they got to the trading post, the town looked suspicious, hunched under the snow. Mr. Davies, the station master, was surprised to see them, especially Clara. "Lord, Miss Howell," he said, not unkindly. I figured you were long gone, or worse." "We need salt, Mr. Davies," Clara said, her voice steady, "and ammunition, and flour, if you have any." As Davies measured out the goods, the door to the post swung open, letting in a blast of cold air. It was Jed, the miner with the red beard, the one who had called her a squaw wife. He was with two of his friends, and he was already drunk, his eyes watery and mean. He saw them. A slow, ugly grin spread across his face. "Well, looky here," he slurred, swaggering over. "It's the happy couple, the Apache and his dollar bride. You still alive out there, girl? Or is he just keeping you warm for the winter?" Taza did not move. He was counting the cartridges Davies had placed on the counter. Clara's face burned. "We don't want any trouble, sir." "Oh, you are the trouble, missy." Jed sneered. He got closer, his breath a foul wave of whiskey. "The whole town's talking. It ain't right. A white woman with him. It's a disgrace." Taza finished counting. He pushed the coin toward Davies. He picked up the sack of salt. "We go," he said to Clara. He turned to leave. Jed stepped in his way, shoving Taza's shoulder. "I'm talking to you, Savage. Did you steal her, or did you just buy her 'cause no decent man would have her?" Taza looked at the hand on his shoulder. He looked at Jed's face. His eyes went flat, cold, the same look he had given the miners at the hut. "Move," Taza said. "Or what?" Jed laughed, pushing him again. "You gonna challenge me? You ain't nothing but a ghost. A red ghost." Taza hit him. It was not a brawl. It was not a clumsy, drunken push. It was one single, fast, brutal motion. Taza dropped the sack and struck Jed in the throat with the heel of his hand. Jed made a horrible gagging sound and stumbled back. "Outside," Taza said to Clara, his voice a low growl she had never heard. She grabbed the flour. Taza grabbed the salt and ammunition, and they walked out. Jed came staggering out after them, his face purple, his friends egging him on. "You'll pay for that! You!" he roared. And he lunged at Taza from behind, tackling him into the snow. Clara screamed. It was not a fight. It was what the outline said, a near killing. Taza's grief, his rage, the memory of his lost family, the years of being called a ghost, it all came pouring out. He rolled, and in one move, he was on top of Jed. He was a warrior. He did not punch. He struck, precise and terrible. He hit Jed in the ribs, a sickening crack. He grabbed his head and slammed it against the frozen, packed snow of the street. Once, twice. Clara saw his face. It was not Taza. It was a stranger, a mask of pure, cold violence. Jed had stopped fighting. He was limp, but Taza did not stop. He drew his knife. "Taza!" Clara screamed. It was a raw, terrified sound. "No, Taza, stop! You're killing him!" Her voice cut through the red rage. He froze. His arm was raised, the knife glittering in the weak winter sun. He was breathing in great, ragged gasps, his eyes wide and terrible, slowly focused on her. He was shaking. He looked down at the man beneath him. Jed was bloody, unmoving. He looked at the knife in his hand as if he had never seen it before. He had almost done it. He had almost become the beast they said he was. The violence terrified him. He got up, slowly, stumbling back. Jed's friends, who had been cheering, were silent now, their faces pale. They rushed to their friend, dragging him away. Taza just stood there, his chest heaving. He looked at his own hands, one of them bloody from Jed's mouth. Clara was terrified. Not of him, for him. She saw the shock in his face, the self-loathing. They gathered their supplies, mounted their horses, and rode out of town. No one tried to stop them. They did not speak the whole way home. The silence was thick, sick, and cold. When they got back to the hut, Taza did not build the fire. He did not unsaddle his horse. He just stood by the corral, his back to her, staring at the canyon wall as the light began to fail. Clara put the supplies inside. She unsaddled her horse. And then she built the fire. The silence stretched until it was dark. He was still outside, shaking. She could not bear it. She went out to him. He was scrubbing his hands with snow, a desperate, frantic motion, trying to get the blood off. She stood near him, her own heart aching. He finally stopped, his hands raw. He looked at her, his face exposed and full of a pain that was deeper than anger. I almost, he whispered. He could not say it. Clara stepped forward. This time, she was the one who moved. She pressed her hand to his. It was a deliberate, firm touch. His skin was ice cold. You are not what they say, she whispered, her voice fierce. You are not a beast. A beast would not have stopped. He looked down at her small, chapped hand on his. He was still trembling. He met her gaze. His own was full of the ghosts of his past, of the warrior he had been, of the man he had just almost become again. He saw her, standing there in the cold, not afraid of him, but for him. She was defending him from himself. He reached up, his other hand shaking, and touched her face. You, he said, his voice thick, are not broken. It was her line, the word she hated, barren, damaged, broken. He was giving it back to her, a different meaning. He was telling her she was whole. They stood there, in the freezing dark, the wind whispering around them. They had seen the worst of each other, his violence, her shame, and they were both still standing. He leaned down, slowly. She did not pull back. She rose up to meet him. They kissed. It was not a kiss of fire. It was not the kiss of storybooks. It was slow. It was gentle. It was chapped lips against chapped lips. It tasted of salt and snow and smoke. It was a kiss of two people who had been taught, by the world, by their families, by their own grief, that they were unlovable. It was the first terrifying, quiet moment of daring to want. That kiss, out there in the freezing dark, it changed the air in the hut. It was a line drawn. Before, they were two survivors, sharing a space. After, they were something else. But Taza was Taza. He did not change. He did not push. He did not assume. He had given her his respect, and he would not take it back. They went back inside the hut. The fire was burning low. The small room was cold. Clara went to her bedroll, the one on the floor, far from his. Taza went to his, the raised platform. The old distance was back, and it felt wrong now. It felt cold and stupid. Clara shivered. It was not just the cold. It was the memory of the fight, the fear, the violence. It was the memory of his hand on her cheek, and her hand on his. Taza lay on his bedroll, his back to her. He was as still as he always was, but she knew he was not asleep. He was still shaking off the rage from town. He was still the man who had scrubbed his hands raw in the snow. Clara could not sleep. The cold from the floor was seeping into her bones. She sat up. "Taza?" she whispered. He did not move, but his breathing stopped. Just for a second. He was listening. It is very cold," she said. He turned his head. He looked at her, a shadow in the dim, flickering light of the embers. He said nothing. He just watched her. She stood up, pulling her thin blanket around her. She took the 3 steps that separated them. It felt like crossing a canyon. She stood by his bedroll. He looked up at her. His eyes were dark and full of questions he would never ask. This had to be her choice. "There is room," she whispered, "for 2. He did not answer. He just moved over, making a space. She lay down. She did not lie against him. She lay beside him, on top of the furs, pulling her own blanket over her. The warmth from his body was immediate. It was like stepping out of the wind. They lay there, side by side, rigid, not touching. They just breathed in the small, warm space. "Good night, Taza," she whispered. She heard him let out a long, slow breath. "Good night, Clara." That was the first night. The next night, it was easier. The wind was high. She just went to the bed. It was their bed now. She lay down, and he was there. This time, her arm brushed his. He did not pull away. It deepened. It was not a fire. It was a slow thaw. It was the winter. It was the isolation. It was the shared breath in the dark. One night, she woke from a bad dream. She was shivering, but not from cold. He was awake. He was always awake when she stirred. "A bad dream," she whispered, trying to calm her heart. "What?" he asked. She was silent for a long time. She had never told this to anyone, not even the doctor. "I dream. Sometimes," she said, her voice small, "that I am holding a baby, that it is mine. It is so clear. I can feel the weight of it, the warmth. I can smell its hair." She pressed her hand against her lower stomach, where the cold, dead place was. "And then I wake up, and my arms are empty, and I remember I am empty." She was crying, silent tears, the way she had that first night, but this time, she was not alone. Taza was quiet. He lay on his back, looking at the dark, packed earth ceiling. He thought for a long time. He was not a man for easy comfort. He did not have words for things that were not true. He turned on his side. He faced her. He reached out, his hand rough and warm. He did not touch her stomach. He did not touch her breast. He just touched her cheek. He wiped away a tear with his thumb. "You still hold me," he said. Clara stopped breathing. She looked at him. He was not a dream. He was real. His weight was beside her. His warmth was real. Her arms were not empty. She moved, turning toward him. She put her head on his shoulder, and her arm across his chest. She was holding him. He put his own arm around her, pulling her close. He was right. She was not empty. He did not demand. He never demanded. He was Taza. He was the man who gave her water first. He was the man who fixed her shoes. He was the man who stopped. She was the one who came to him. She was the one who, in the deep, freezing quiet of the winter, kissed his scarred jaw. She was the one who pressed her body against his, seeking not just warmth, but life. She came to him, willingly, and he was gentle, and he was slow, and he was kind. He was a man who had been taught that he was a ghost, and she was a woman who had been taught that she was broken, and in that small, dark hut, buried in the snow, they proved to the world, and to each other, that they were both whole. Their romance grew. It was not like any romance Clara had ever read about. It was private. It was quiet. It was strong. It was in the way he looked at her in the morning, his eyes softer. It was in the way she saved him the best piece of rabbit stew, and he knew it. It was in the way they moved around the small hut, a silent dance, never bumping, always aware of where the other was. It was in the way he would touch her hair, just once, as he passed by. It was in the way she would mend his shirt, and when she was done, she would hold it to her face for a moment, breathing in the smell of him, smoke and leather and pine. The hard winter locked them in. The town, the miners, her brother, Gideon Cole, it all seemed 1,000 miles away. They were isolated, they were peaceful. They survived. They built a life out of roots, and snared rabbits, and shared warmth. Spring came late and angry. The snow melted in a rush, turning the canyon river into a red, roaring torrent. The land was muddy and raw, but there were small, purple flowers in the rocks. They needed supplies. The salt was gone. The flour was gone. The ammunition was low. "I will go," Taza said. "I will come," Clara said. It was not a question. They rode to town together. They were a pair now. The town was different. The fight with Jed had left a mark. People watched them. When they walked into the trading post, the few men in there went silent. Mr. Davies was nervous. He served them quickly, his hands shaking a little. He did not want more trouble. "Here," Davies said, sliding the sacks toward Taza. "That is all of it." Then he stopped. He looked at Clara. "Oh, Lord, I almost forgot. This came for you, Miss Howell, weeks ago. On the stage. I did not know if you were still well." He reached under the counter and pulled out a letter. It was a fine, cream-colored envelope, stained with mud and water. Clara's heart stopped. She knew the handwriting. It was crisp and strong and angled forward, like the man who had written it. Her brother, Edwin. She took it. Her hands were trembling. Taza watched her, his face unreadable. She did not open it, not there. She tucked it into the pocket of her dress. They paid Davies, packed the supplies, and rode home. The whole way, the letter felt like a hot stone against her leg. When they got back to the hut, she sat on the stool, her hands in her lap, staring at the envelope. Taza put the supplies away. He did not rush her. He did not ask. He just waited. Finally, she broke the seal. Her fingers, chapped and rough, fumbled with the fine paper. She read, "Clara, it is with a heavy heart I inform you that Father passed on in November. His heart failed. His debts have been settled. The house, all of it, was sold. There is money now. I am in Arizona territory on business, in Prescott. It has come to my attention that your arrangement with Mr. Cole was terminated, and that you were left stranded. This is unacceptable. You are a Howell. I am coming to fetch you. It is not right for you to be alone in such a place. I will be in your town in approximately 2 weeks from this letter's date. Be ready to leave. Your brother, Edwin." Clara read it twice. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. "Father is dead," she whispered. Taza stopped. He turned. "He is dead," she said again, her voice numb. "And there is money. My brother, Edwin, he is coming here to fetch me." She looked up at Taza, her eyes wide and full of a sudden, terrible confusion. Edwin. He was her older brother. He was cruel, yes, but he was proper. He was safe. He was the world she had known. He was offering her money, a home, a return to the life she had lost, a life with clean sheets and real food, and no minors calling her ugly names, a life where she would not be a disgrace. Taza watched her. He saw the storm in her face. He saw the pull. He knew what her brother represented. He was the white world, coming to claim what was his. And Taza was just the Apache who had paid $1. He had no money. He had no proper house. He had nothing to offer her but this hard, dangerous, quiet life. He had to do it. He had to give her the choice. That night, the new intimacy was gone. They lay in the bed, but there was a cold space between them. Clara was turned away from him, her body rigid. Taza spoke to the dark. "You can go." Clara flinched, as if he had hit her. She did not turn. "You are free," he said. His voice was flat, empty. "He is your blood. He has money. You will be safe." "Safe," the word hung in the air. "You do not belong here." "Clara," he said, and it cost him everything to say it. "This is not your land." Clara said nothing. She just lay there, frozen. Taza turned his back to her, and she did not see, in the dark, that he did not meet her eyes. He did not even look at her. He just stared at the cold adobe wall, a proud man offering her the freedom to destroy him. The 2 weeks were a special kind of torture. They did not speak of it. They went on with the chores. They set the snares. They mended the roof. But the silence was broken. It was not a shared, peaceful silence. It was a taut, heavy, waiting silence. Taza was distant, cold. He was building a wall around himself. He was preparing to be alone again. Clara was a ghost. She was torn. Part of her, the part that was still a proper Missouri lady, screamed at her to go, to take the money, to be safe, to stop living in the dirt, to stop being the town's shame. But then she would look at Taza. She would see him carving a piece of wood, his hands so strong and sure. She would remember him giving her water first. She would remember him saying, "You are not broken." She would remember the feel of his body against hers in the cold. She did not know what to do. And then he came. It was just as the letter said. A wagon. But it was not a rough farm wagon. It was a shiny black carriage, pulled by 2 fine horses, not desert mustangs. A hired driver sat on the bench. The carriage pulled up, and her brother stepped out. Edwin Howell. He was tall, like Taza, but it was a different kind of height. It was stiff and proud and brittle. He wore a black wool suit, a starched white collar, and a city hat. He looked like he had been dropped from another planet. He smelled of soap and cigars. He looked at the hut. He looked at the smoking chimney, the patched corral, the muddy ground. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Clara," he called. Clara stepped out of the hut. Taza came with her, standing just behind her, his hand resting on the knife at his belt. Edwin saw her. He saw her dress, patched with rawhide. He saw her hands, red and chapped. He saw her hair, tied back with a simple thong, the carved comb Taza had made tucked into it. "My God," Edwin breathed. He was horrified. "Clara, what has been done to you?" He started forward, but then he saw Taza. Edwin stopped. He looked Taza up and down. He saw the long hair, the dark skin, the moccasins, the knife. This is him?" he sneered. "This is the savage?" "His name is Taza," Clara said, her voice trembling. He saved me." "Saved you?" Edwin laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. "It looks to me like he bought you. I heard the story in town. $1. Is that what a Howell is worth? A single dollar to this?" Taza said nothing. He just stood there, a shadow, a rock. He was waiting for her. "Edwin, please," Clara begged. "You do not understand." "I understand perfectly," Edwin snapped. "I understand you are a disgrace to our family name. But Father is dead, and I am in charge now. You will not stay here. Pack your things. What few things you have, we are leaving." He did not ask. He commanded. He looked at Taza. "The $1. I will repay you for your trouble." He reached into his coat, pulled out a leather wallet. He took out $2 silver. "Here, this is double your investment. Now, release her." He threw the coins on the ground, in the mud, between them. Taza did not look at the money. He looked at Clara. This was it, the choice. Clara looked at the money in the mud. $2 silver. She looked at her brother, his face impatient and angry. He was offering her safety, money, a home. She looked at Taza. He was offering her nothing. Nothing but this hard, real, shared life. She was torn. The fear was so strong. The shame was so strong. "Clara," Edwin said, his voice softer, but still hard. "Come home. There is money. You can have a good life. You can find a proper husband. We can forget this ever happened." She began to go. She did not know why. Maybe it was the habit of obeying. Maybe it was the lure of safety. Maybe it was just the crushing weight of expectation. She took a step. She walked past the money. She walked toward her brother. Edwin smiled, a thin, triumphant smile. He held out his hand for her. Taza watched her walk away from him. He did not move. He did not speak. His face was stone. But Clara saw his hand, the one not on his knife, clench just once. She was at the wagon. Edwin had her arm. "That is right," he said. "Get in! Driver! Open the door!" She had her foot on the step. She stopped. She was looking at the back of the hired driver, and she was thinking, "Fetch me, take me home, release her." She thought of her father, selling her off. She thought of Edwin, paying Taza for his investment. She thought of Gideon Cole, roaring that she was damaged goods. They were all the same. They were all trading her, buying her, selling her. All of them, except one. She looked back. Taza was still there. He had not moved. He was watching her. He had given her the freedom to break his heart, to walk away. He had not demanded. He had not commanded. He had not even asked. He had said, "You are free." She finally understood what that meant. She pulled her arm from her brother's grasp. "Clara!" he snapped. She turned around. She walked back. She did not stop at the money. She did not stop in the middle. She walked all the way back, through the mud, until she was standing right beside Taza. She was shaking from head to foot, but her voice was clear. It was as clear and cold as the river water. "No, Edwin." "What did you say?" he asked, his face darkening. "Get in this wagon. Do not be a fool." "No," she said again. "I am not going." "He is a savage. He bought you. He owns you," Edwin shouted. Clara stood tall. She looked her brother right in the eye. "He paid $1, she said, "but he never owned me." She turned and looked at Taza, at this man who had given her a comb and shoes and life. "And he gave me more than you ever did," she said, her voice thick with a truth that was so powerful it hurt. "You and Father, you saw me as a failure, a debt, something to be sold off or gotten rid of. He saw a person. He never demanded anything. He never called me broken. He gave me dignity." She looked back at her brother. "I am not going with you. This is my home." She stayed. She stood beside Taza, a pair. Edwin's face went from angry to white with rage. This was not just a refusal. This was defiance. This was a rejection of him, of their blood, of their world. "You are a disgrace," he hissed. "A fool. You choose this? You choose filth over your own family?" "He is my family," Clara said, and she did not know it was true until she said it. "You will regret this," Edwin spat. "I will not let this stand. You are my sister. I will have you taken from here. I will have the law on him. I will see him hanged. And you put in an asylum where you belong." He turned, his face terrible. "You will rue this day. Clara, I vow it." He got into his fine carriage. He did not look back. "Go!" he shouted at the driver. The carriage turned, spraying mud, and rumbled out of the canyon, leaving a deep, heavy silence in its wake. Clara and Taza stood there, side by side, watching it go. She had made her choice. She had stayed. The peace was broken. The private, quiet world they had built was gone. Her brother had vowed revenge, and the whole town had heard the story. The carriage driver would talk. The dollar bride had refused her wealthy brother. She had chosen the Apache. Clara looked at Taza. He was looking at her, and his face was no longer stone. There was something in his eyes she had never seen before. Not grief, not peace. It was awe. She had chosen him. But they both knew. The world was coming. The town, and her brother. They were watching, and the hostility, which had been a low simmer, was about to boil. The carriage was gone. The ruts its wheels had cut in the mud were the only sign it had ever been there. Clara stood beside Taza, her body trembling so hard she thought her knees would give way. The silence that rushed back into the canyon was huge. heavier than before. She had done it. She had chosen. She had spat in her brother's face, rejected her family, her world, and all its rules. She had tied her fate to this man, this land, this impossible, hard life. Taza turned his head. He looked at her. The awe she had seen in his eyes was still there, but it was mixed with a new, deep, and terrible gravity. She had not just chosen him. She had chosen his danger. She had painted a target on them both. He did not celebrate. He did not pull her close. He was a survivor, and his first thought was of the coming war. He looked at the tracks in the mud, then up at the canyon rim, as if he could already see the riders silhouetted against the sky. "He will come back," Taza said. His voice was flat. "Or he will send others." The peace was over. The private world they had built was broken open. That night, Taza did not sleep. He sat by the fire, his rifle across his knees, cleaning and oiling it until the metal gleamed in the firelight. Clara watched him. "You should sleep," she whispered. "No," he said. "We prepare." Preparation was work. It was Taza's answer to fear. The next morning, he was not a hunter. He was a warrior, preparing his defenses. "The door is weak," he said. He found a thick piece of cottonwood, cured and hard, and fashioned a heavy bar for the inside. The single window, a small square hole, was a vulnerability. He spent a day building a solid wooden shutter that could be barred from the inside, plunging the room into darkness but making it a fortress. He took inventory of their weapons, his rifle, his knife, and an old, heavy pistol, a Navy model, that he kept in his war bag with his ammunition. He held it out to her, butt first. Clara looked at it. I have never fired a gun. Taza." "You will," he said. He took her down by the river. He set up a piece of dried gourd on a rock. He showed her how to load, how to hold the heavy thing with 2 hands, how to aim, how to squeeze the trigger, not pull it. The first time she fired, the sound was deafening. The kick of it almost knocked her over, and the shot went wild, kicking up dirt 10 feet to the left. "Again," he said. She fired again, and again. Her hands were shaking. Her ears were ringing. "You are thinking of the noise," he said. "Do not think. Just look. See the target. See nothing else." She fired, and the gourd exploded. She stood there, her arm aching, the smell of sulfur and smoke thick in her nose. She had taken a life, a gourd life. It made her feel sick and strong, all at once. "Good," he said. He took the pistol and tucked it into the waistband of her skirt, the heavy iron pressing cold against her stomach. "You keep this. Always." They were preparing, but for what? The outline said he warned friendly neighbors. She had thought they were alone, but Taza, she learned, was not as isolated as he seemed. One afternoon, he rode out. He was gone for hours. He returned near dusk. "Where did you go?" she asked. "To the Garcias," he said. "Old family. They live in the next canyon. They trade with no one. Edwin's men. They do not know the land. They might mistake their home for ours. I told them to watch." He had not asked for help. He had gone to warn others. He was part of a hidden web, a community of people who just wanted to be left alone. The waiting was the worst part. Every night, they barred the door, shuttered the window. The hut was hot, dark, and airless. They lay on the bed, side by side, fully dressed, the rifle between them, the pistol under Clara's hand. They took turns sleeping. One would doze for an hour, while the other sat, listening to the wind, to the coyotes, to the snap of a twig. Every sound was a threat. The attack came a week after Edwin had left. It was a moonless, suffocatingly dark night. Clara was on watch, her eyes burning from staring into the blackness through a small crack in the shutter. Taza was breathing deeply beside her, in that light, animal sleep of his. She heard it. "Not a horse?" Not a man, a crackle.
She smelled it. Smoke.
Taza,
she whispered, shaking him.
Fire.
He was awake instantly. No confusion, no fear. He was at the shutter, peering out. An orange light was growing. The shed, he breathed. The small lean-to where they kept their firewood. Their traps, their tools. It was burning.
They are out there, he said. They set the fire to draw us out.
He grabbed his rifle. Stay here. Bar the door behind me. Do not open it. For anyone, not even me, until I call.
No, Taza, do not go out there.
They will burn the house next. Stay down. He unbarred the door, slipped out into the night like a shadow, and she slammed the heavy bar back into place. She was alone, in the dark. Her heart was a wild bird in a cage. She could hear them now, shouting.
Come on out, Apache, we got a light for you.
It was Jed's voice, the miner. He had come back, and he had brought friends. Clara ran to the shutter, peered through the crack. She could see them, shadows dancing in the light of the burning shed. 3 men, maybe 4. They were masked, strips of cloth covering their faces. Taza was not there. He had not gone toward the fire. He had melted into the rocks. A shot. The crack of Taza's rifle. From the darkness behind them, one of the men screamed and fell.
He is in the rocks,
Jed yelled. Another shot. Taza was moving, firing from a different place. He was a ghost. Clara's heart was in her throat. He was 1 man against 3. She heard a sound, right at the door, a thud. Thud. Someone was at the door. Not Taza. A heavy boot kicked the wood.
Crack. Forget the Apache. Get the woman. Burn the hut.
The heavy bar Taza had made was holding, but the wood of the door itself was splitting.
Thud.
A hole appeared. A hand reached through, fumbling for the bar. Clara backed away, her heart stopping. She raised the pistol, her hands shaking so violently she could barely aim. The man on the other side gave a roar of frustration. He put his shoulder to the door and shoved. The splitting wood gave way. The bar tore free from one of its braces, and the door swung open. A man stood there, masked. He held a torch in one hand, a long knife in the other. He saw her. He stopped. He laughed.
Well, hello, pretty thing,
he slurred. He saw the pistol in her hands.
You ain't gonna use that? You ain't got the... Clara fired.
She did not think. She just saw the target, the way Taza had taught her. She aimed for his leg. The sound was deafening in the small hut. The room filled with a cloud of white, choking smoke. The man screamed. It was not a laugh. It was a high, terrible sound. He dropped the torch and the knife, grabbing his thigh as dark blood pumped through his fingers. He stumbled back, out of the doorway, and collapsed, writhing. The shouting outside stopped.
He is shot! Micah's shot!
Where did it come from?
From the hut! The woman shot him!
That, and the relentless crack of Taza's rifle from the darkness, was enough. They had come for an easy burning, an easy revenge. They had found a fortress, and 2 people who would fight. They lost their nerve.
Get Micah! Get him! We are leaving!
Clara peered out. She saw Jed and another man grab the wounded one, dragging him, and scramble onto their horses. They rode out of the canyon, a frantic, chaotic retreat, leaving the burning shed to light up their failure. The silence that returned was absolute, just the crackle of the fire. Clara stood in the middle of the room, the heavy pistol still hot in her hand. She was shaking, but she had not dropped it. There was blood on her floor. The door was broken. She heard a sound, a single, soft step.
Clara?
It was Taza's voice. She almost wept with relief. She ran to the door. He was standing there, his rifle in his hand, his face grim in the firelight. He was not hurt. He looked at her. He looked at the smoking pistol in her hand. He looked at the blood on the threshold. He stepped inside. He did not touch her. He just looked at her,
and his eyes it was the same awe from when she had chosen him. But it was more. It was respect. She had held the line. He looked at the broken door. "I will fix it," he said. The next morning, the sun rose on the smoldering ruin of their shed. Their tools were gone. Their winter wood was ashes. The door to their home was a splintered mess. But they were alive. Clara cleaned the blood from her floor. Taza looked at the tracks. 3 horses, 1 man wounded. They will not be back soon, but they will be back. "We have to go to the law," Clara said. "We have to tell the sheriff." Taza looked at her. He did not believe, but he nodded. She needed to see this for herself. They rode to town. They were a sight. Taza, grim and silent. Clara, with the pistol still tucked in her skirt, her face smudged with soot, her eyes hard. They walked into the sheriff's office. Sheriff Brody, a man whose gut hung over his belt, was cleaning his fingernails with a pocket knife. "Sheriff Brody," Clara said, her voice clear. "Our home was attacked last night. A group of masked men, led by Jed, the miner. They burned our shed and tried to kill us." Brody sighed. He put his knife down. He looked at them with a profound, weary annoyance. "Now, Miss Howell," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Those are strong accusations. Masked men, you say. How do you know it was Jed?" "I heard his voice," Clara said. "You heard his voice? In the dark, while your shed was burning. And you say they tried to kill you?" "They broke down my door. I shot one of them, in the leg. They were armed." Brody's eyes narrowed. "You shot one of them. So, you shot Micah. That's Jed's cousin. He rode in this morning. Claimed he had a hunting accident. You shot him." "I defended my home." "Or," Brody said, leaning forward, "or Taza here had a fight with Jed. Taza here beat him half to death in the street. Jed's friends, they got drunk. They rode out to make a point. You were waiting for 'em. You shot one. Seems to me, Miss Howell, that you handled it. I'd call it even a hunting accident." Clara could not believe it. "Even? They came to our home. They tried to burn us out. Is that not a crime?" The sheriff stood up. His face was hard. "Listen to me, girl. You are the trouble, not Jed. You, a fine, rich gentleman. Your brother came all this way to take you home, to save you, and you spat in his face. You chose to stay out there. With him." He jerked his chin at Taza. "You are stirring up trouble. You are making the town uneasy. This ain't Missouri. We got a delicate balance here, and you are upsetting it. My advice to you, don't stir up trouble. You want peace. You should have gone with your brother. I am not sending any men out there. You lay low. You don't make it worse. Now, get out of my office." They were alone. The law had not just turned its back. It had blamed them. The ride home was the longest they had ever taken. The weight of her choice settled on Clara, heavy as a shroud. She had shot a man. She had been abandoned by the law. She had doomed them both. They stood by the ruins of the shed. The sun was setting, painting the canyon walls a bloody red. "They want to erase us," she whispered. The words came from that hollow place inside her. "The miners, my brother, the sheriff. They want us to be gone. They want us to have never existed." She looked at Taza. His face was hard, turned toward the setting sun. He was silent for a long time. The wind picked up, cool and sad. "Yes," he said, his voice low. "They want to erase us." He turned to her. His eyes were not full of despair. They were full of a hard, quiet fire. "Then we make something," he said. "That lasts longer than hate." Clara did not understand. "Make what?" "Taza, our shed is gone. Our door is broken. They will come back." He took her hand. He did not lead her to the hut. He led her down, past the ruined cornfield, to the place by the river where the cottonwoods grew, the place where they sat, the place where he had taught her to see the land. He took her to a large, flat rock that faced the water. It was the place where they had first truly kissed, that night after the fight in town, when she had pressed her hand to his and called him human. He pulled his knife, the same knife he had almost killed Jed with, the same knife he had used to carve her comb. He knelt in the dirt, and he began to carve. He was not a man of letters, but he was a man of the stone. He carved, deep and sure, into the red sandstone, a T, an A, a Z, an A. Taza. It was rough, it was simple, it was permanent. He stood up. He looked at the name. Then he looked at her. He offered her the knife. Handle first. She understood. Her hands were shaking. This was more sacred than any church. This was their vow. She knelt. The stone was cool. She placed the tip of the knife, and with a strength she did not know she possessed, she began to carve. It was harder than she thought. Her letters were clumsy, shallow, and crooked next to his. A C, an L, an A, an R, an A. Clara. There it was. Taza, Clara, side by side, cut into the land itself, a testament. We were here. We are here. We will not be erased. They stood there, hands linked, looking at it. As the light failed, it was not justice, it was not safety, but it was a promise. That night, as Taza rebuilt their door, that promise gave Clara a new idea, a new, terrifying idea. A few days later, they rode to town for supplies. Mr. Davies, the trading post owner, was the only one who would still speak to them, and only in a low, nervous whisper. "You two ought to move on," he said, not meeting their eyes. "The sentiment in this town, it's bad. Your brother, Miss Howell, he has been talking to folks, offering money, saying Taza here is a danger. It ain't safe." "We are not leaving." Clara said, "Mr. Davies, is it true a circuit judge is coming?" Davies looked up, surprised. "Why, yes, Judge Wade. He's due end of the month. Sits for a few days. Handles federal claims." "Why?" "When?" Clara asked. Taza looked at her, a warning in his eyes. "Do not trust them. Clara." She put her hand on his arm. "This is how," she whispered. "This is how we make it last." When Judge Elias Wade arrived, he was not what Clara expected. He was an old, tired man in a dusty black suit, his face worn down by years of travel and hard cases. He set up his court in the saloon, on the stage, the tinkling piano pushed to one side. The room was packed. Edwin was there, in the front row, looking clean and confident. Sheriff Brody was there, Jed and his friends, including Micah, who limped heavily, were in the back, glowering. "What is this?" the judge grumbled, looking at Clara and Taza, who stood before him. "Sheriff, you said this was a land dispute." Edwin stood up. "Your Honor, my name is Edwin Howell. This is my sister, Clara. She is unwell. She is being held by this man, this Apache vagrant. Taza, I am her only living family. I have come to take her home, to get her medical care. She is clearly of unsound mind. I am asking the court to grant me custody of her." The judge looked at Clara. "Miss Howell, are you unwell? Are you here against your will?" Clara's heart was hammering. She could feel the hate in the room. It was a physical thing, pressing on her. She felt Taza's hand next to hers, and she took it. She held it, right there, in front of them all. Edwin gasped. The townspeople murmured. "Your Honor," Clara said, and her voice did not tremble. "My name is Clara Howell. I am of sound mind. I am not unwell, and I am not here against my will." "Then what is this?" the judge asked, his patience wearing thin. "This is my home, Your Honor," Clara said. "That canyon. I am not here to ask for protection. The law in this town has already refused me that." She glanced at Sheriff Brody, who turned red. "I am here,"
she said, her voice rising.
For the right to stay on that land, I am here to be legally recognized.
Recognized as what?
As his wife, she squeezed Taza's hand. And as a homesteader, under federal law. We have lived on that land. We have worked that land. We have defended that land. We claim it.
Edwin exploded.
This is a mockery. She cannot marry that. It is shameful. It is illegal.
Clara turned. She did not face her brother. She faced the room. She faced the hate.
You want to call us shameful, she said, her voice ringing out in the suddenly silent saloon. My brother, this town, all of you, you look at me and you see a disgrace. You look at him and you see a beast.
She turned back to the judge, her eyes shining with tears she would not shed. But I ask you, what is a husband? My father, a respectable man, sold me for his debts, Mr. Cole, a decent man, threw me away because I was barren. My brother, a fine man, tried to buy me for $2. She held up Taza's hand, locked with hers.
This man, Taza, he paid $1, but he never owned me. He never beat me. He never used me. He never left me hungry. He gave me his water before he drank. He taught me to survive. He defended my life with his own.
She took a deep breath, and her voice was raw. What more does a husband owe? The room was stone silent. Judge Wade stared at her. His tired, old eyes had seen every kind of human ugliness. He looked at Clara, at her patched dress and her fierce, proud face. He looked at Taza, who stood beside her, silent, protective, his knuckles white as he held her hand. He looked at Edwin, whose face was twisted in a mask of pure, civilized hatred. He had heard the law, and he had heard the truth. He picked up his gavel and banged it once. Bang!
Mr. Howell, your sister is clearly, painfully, of sound mind. In fact, she seems to be the only person in this room who is, she is an adult. This court recognizes her right to choose her own life.
He looked at Edwin. You will not harass her. You will not send men to her property. If I hear of it, I will have you brought up on federal charges. Do you understand me?
Edwin was speechless.
The judge turned to Clara and Taza. As for the land, you have lived on it. You have improved it. You have defended it. Under the Federal Homestead Act, you have a right to file a claim. I will sign the preliminary papers myself. That land is yours, protected by the law of the United States. He looked at Sheriff Brody.
And you, Sheriff, will see that it is protected. That is all.
This court is adjourned. It was not full justice. The faces in the crowd were still angry. They were still full of hate. Edwin looked like he wanted to commit murder. But it was something. It was a piece of paper. It was a shield. Clara and Taza walked out of the saloon, hand in hand, into the hard, bright sunlight. They had not won acceptance, but they had won the land. They had won the right to exist. That piece of paper from Judge Wade. It was not magic. It did not make the hate go away. Edwin left town, his face like a thundercloud, but the poison he had spread lingered. Jed and his friends still drank in the saloon, still muttered, still cast long, ugly shadows. But the paper did something else. It was a shield, a thin one, but it was made of federal law. Sheriff Brody, who wanted nothing more than a quiet life, now had a new problem. If he let Taza and Clara be burned out, Judge would hear about it, and Brody liked his job. So he did the bare minimum. He rode out once, told Jed to let it be. The town, seeing the law, had grudgingly taken a side, pulled back. The hostility did not vanish. It just quieted. It went from a roar to a low, mean whisper. And in that quiet, the world changed. The hard, brutal winter finally broke. The snows melted. The river ran full and clean. And a fragile, desperate green began to push up through the red dirt. Months passed. The terror of the attack faded, leaving a scar.
but scars are what tough skin is made of. Spring came to the canyon. It came with a rush of pale desert blossoms, little stars of white and yellow scattered on the thorny brush. The air, which had been so cold and sharp, turned soft. It smelled of damp earth and willow. They had survived, and now they began to live. Taza's first act, with the land legally theirs, was to build a proper wall around the small yard, a low, strong one of adobe and rock, not for defense, for a garden. The corn they planted this time was not a desperate gamble for survival. It was a promise. They planted it together, Taza punching the holes in the damp earth, Clara dropping in the seeds, her hands, no longer pale and soft, moving with a sure, practiced rhythm. Clara had Taza bring a sack of seed from the Garcias, and she planted flowers. Along the new wall, she planted bright red chiles, but also moonflowers and desert marigolds, a patch of color, of beauty, that had no purpose other than being beautiful. Taza watched her, and Clara thought of her mother's rose garden, the one that was plowed under. She was planting it again, here, in the dust. And then they planted a tree, a small, thin cottonwood sapling they dug from downriver. They planted it in the center of the yard. It was a statement, as permanent as the names they had carved in the rock. It was a root. It said, "We are here. We will not be moved." Their fields began to thrive. The corn grew tall. The flowers bloomed, a riot of impossible color against the red rock. One afternoon, Clara was checking her snares, farther up the canyon than she usually went. The pistol Taza had given her was still tucked in her skirt, a familiar, heavy weight. She heard something, a sound, like a small animal, a cough. She froze. She pulled the pistol, her heart starting that old, fast rhythm. She pushed aside a curtain of willow branches. It was not an animal, it was a child. A little girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old. She was skeletal, her small body just bones covered in dirt-caked rags. Her black hair was a matted, tangled mess. She was crouched by the river, trying to catch a tadpole in her small, claw-like hands. She looked up when Clara entered, and her eyes, they were the only living thing about her. They were huge, black, and absolutely wild with terror. She did not scream, she did not cry, she just opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She was mute. "Oh, my heavens," Clara breathed. She put the pistol on the ground, slowly, showing her empty hands. "It is all right. I will not hurt you. It is all right." The girl just stared, trembling. Clara did not move closer. She just sat on the ground, 10 feet away. She sat for a long time. She started to hum, a little tune her mother used to hum, low and soft. The girl watched. Clara pulled a piece of jerky from her pocket. She laid it on a rock between them, then moved back. The girl's eyes darted to the jerky. She did not move for almost an hour. Then, quick as a snake, she darted forward, snatched the food, and scrambled back, stuffing it in her mouth, her eyes never leaving Clara's face. Clara went home. She told Taza. He did not ask questions. He just picked up his rifle and walked up the canyon. Clara's heart seized. Was he going to what? He was gone for an hour. When he came back, he was not alone. The girl was walking behind him. Not with him, just following, 20 feet back, like a stray dog. Taza walked into the hut. The girl stopped at the doorway, poised to bolt. "She is alone," Taza said. His voice was grim, full of a darkness Clara had not heard since the fight in town. "What happened?" Clara asked. "A raid, up north. Soldiers, maybe, or vigilantes. Hard to tell. I found the camp, all burned, everyone gone." He looked at the child, who was staring at him with those huge, silent eyes. Taza knew the signs. He knew what it was to be the only one left. He saw himself in her. He was an orphan. She was an orphan. Survivors. Clara got a cup of water and a piece of corn cake. She set it on the threshold. "It is all right," she whispered. "You can come in." The girl looked at the food, at Clara, at Taza. She darted in, grabbed the food, and retreated to the farthest, darkest corner of the room, by the hearth. She sat there, her knees to her chest, and ate, watching them. She did not leave. They did not ask her to. There was no official adoption. There was no paper. There was no law for a child like this. There was just care. She did not speak, not for days, not for weeks. She would not sleep in a bed. She slept on a small pile of furs Taza put for her. In the corner, she would not let Clara touch her. If Clara came too close, she would flinch, a violent, full-body shudder. So Clara just existed around her. She hummed. She worked in her garden. She mended clothes. And she left a small, mended dress by the girl's sleeping pile. One morning, the girl was wearing it. Clara gave her a name, but she did not say it to the girl. She said it to Taza. "I will call her Hope," Clara whispered one night, as they lay in their bed, watching the child sleep. Taza said nothing, but he reached out and took Clara's hand in the dark. Hope, that was what she was. A small, wild, broken thing that had, against all odds, survived. The girl, Hope, slowly healed. The thinness left her. Her hair, which Clara finally was allowed to wash and comb with the comb Taza had made, grew shiny and black. She still did not speak, but she began to follow Clara. She would sit in the garden while Clara weeded. She would hold the sinew while Clara sewed. She would watch Taza as he carved, her black eyes following every move of the knife. One evening, Clara was sitting by the fire, mending. Taza was outside. Hope was sitting on the floor, nearby. Clara sighed. It was a long day. She was tired. She pressed her hand to her lower stomach, to that old, familiar place of emptiness, that cold, sad knot of shame. It was a habit she had never quite broken. Hope, who watched everything, saw the gesture. She stood up. She walked over to Clara. Clara froze, not wanting to scare her. The girl, this small, silent child, reached out a hesitant, dirty hand, and she pressed it, flat, against Clara's belly, right where Clara's own hand had been. She just held it there, her small, warm hand, on that place Clara had been told was barren and empty and worthless. Clara looked down at the hand and the stone she had carried inside her for so many years, the stone of shame, the stone of being broken. It did not just crack, it dissolved, it washed away. Tears began to run down Clara's face, hot, silent tears. But they were not tears of grief, they were tears of release. She covered the child's small hand with her own. She looked at this girl, this life that had come to her from the desert. She looked at the strong, mended door of her home. She thought of Taza, the man who held her in the night. "I was never empty," Clara whispered, the words catching in her throat. I was never empty. The child, Hope, just looked up at her, and for the first time, her face was not terrified. It was just calm. The town, as the months turned, began to soften. It was not acceptance. It was not friendship. It was cracks, small cracks in a high wall. Edwin was gone. The immediate, money-fueled threat was gone. What was left was Taza and Clara, just living. They were a fact, a permanent part of the landscape, like the canyon rock itself. One day, Mrs. Garcia, the woman from the next canyon, rode over. She was a stern, weathered woman with kind eyes. She did not dismount. She just held out a small sack. "The chiles are good this year," she said in thick, broken English. "Too many. You take—" Clara took the sack of dried red chilies. "Thank you, Mrs. Garcia." "The child," Mrs. Garcia said, nodding at Hope, who was hiding behind Clara's skirts. "She is Sola?" Alone? Yes, Clara said. Mrs. Garcia nodded. She understood. Dios la cuide, God keep her. She rode off. It was a beginning. Mr. Davies, at the trading post, started saving them scraps of cloth. For the girl, he would mutter, pushing the bundle at Clara, not meeting her eyes. The biggest crack came one day in the late summer. A new doctor had come to town, replacing the old drunk one. This one was young, Eastern, and had a face that had not yet been hardened by the desert. He rode out to their canyon. Taza met him at the edge of the garden, his hand on his knife, his face like stone. The doctor did not try to come closer. He just tipped his hat. Mr. Taza, ma'am. He nodded at Clara. I am Dr. Allen. I wanted the folks out here to know I am available. For anything. He reached into his bag. I heard about the trouble. Last winter, I brought you something. He held out a small, blue bottle. Laudanum. For pain. In case of accidents, you keep it. No charge. Clara stepped forward and took the bottle. Thank you, Doctor. It is a hard land, Doctor, Allen said, looking at their neat, thriving garden, at the strong, new door on the hut, at the little girl peering from the window. You folks, you seem to be making a go of it. Good day. He tipped his hat, and he left. It was not an apology from the town. It was not an invitation, but it was a crack in the wall. They were no longer the squaw wife and the savage. They were you folks. The seasons turned again. The first anniversary of that night in the abandoned cabin came, the night he had told her, "You're still alive." It was a cool evening. The fire was lit in the hearth, the first fire of the new autumn. The wind was high, howling outside the canyon, but the hut was warm. It was secure. Hope was asleep on her pile of furs, her breathing soft and even. Clara was mending one of Hope's dresses. Taza was sitting across from her, just watching the fire. He had been quiet all day, more so than usual. Now, he reached into his pocket. Clara. She looked up. He held out his hand. In his palm was a ring. It was not a fine gold ring, like the one she had been promised back in Missouri. It was not a ring from a jeweler's case. It was a simple, thin band of silver. But it was not store-bought silver. It was rock. He had found a vein of silver ore, high in the canyon, and he had hammered it, and polished it, and carved it. It was the color of moonlight, and it was carved with the same simple, beautiful lines as the comb he had made her. It was a ring made of the canyon itself, the same rock their names were carved into. She put her sewing down. Her hands were trembling. He did not ask, he just held it out. She gave him her left hand, her chapped, strong, gardener's hand. He slid the ring onto her finger. It was a perfect fit. Taza, she breathed. She looked at the ring, gleaming in the firelight. She looked at this man, her husband. She looked at the sleeping child in the corner. That first night, she said, her voice thick. In that broken cabin, I asked you why you paid for me. I thought it was because I was a woman. I thought it was because you were lonely, or you wanted a servant. She met his eyes. I think I finally know why you did it. Taza looked at her. He saw her, not as the pale, frightened thing from the train platform, but as the woman she was now, strong, whole. Her face was browned by the sun. Her hands were calloused, and she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He finally gave her the truth, the last piece. I saw you on that platform, he said, his voice low and rough. I saw that man, Cole, and your brother, and all the others. They looked at you, and they saw a thing, a broken thing, a thing to be used, or sold, or thrown away. He reached out and touched the silver ring on her finger. I looked at you, he said, and I saw a person. I saw that you had never, not once in your life, been loved. Not for who you were. You hadn't been loved yet. He paused, and his eyes held her, steady and true. And I wanted to... Clara's heart, which had been through so much breaking, so much mending, felt like it would burst. He had not bought her. He had not saved her. He had chosen her. He had seen her, all of her, and he had wanted to love her. She did not need to say anything. He already knew. They sat by the fire, in the quiet, the three of them. Taza, his arm around his wife. Clara, her head resting on his shoulder, her hand with its new ring resting on his knee, and Hope, the silent child, curled between them on the floor, her hand tucked in Clara's dress, fast asleep. Outside, the harsh desert wind howled against the adobe walls, a reminder of the world that was still out there, a world of hate and hardship and lonely, cold spaces. But inside, the fire burned bright. The hut was small, and it was safe. And the warmth they had built from nothing but $1, and a choice, and a quiet, stubborn love the warmth remained. Thank you for listening to our story tonight. We'd love to hear where you're listening from in the comments so you can connect with fellow listeners. Be sure to subscribe to the Wild West Campfire channel and share your thoughts.